Hey everybody, this is Brian Yellow, and on episode number 22 of Origin Stories on Creativity, I spoke with L.Todd Wood, former Special Operations pilot for the United States Air Force. He used to fly missions for SEAL Team 6 and Delta Force. Guy's written 4 fantastic military thrillers and worked on Wall Street actually. Now he's a journalist. He is an expert on Russia, studied the country while a student at the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. Knows the language, has a fantastic grip on world events, has started his own online news outlet. All of this information is going to be in the show notes. Highly recommend, as I always do, checking out the show notes. He has been featured in the New York Post, the Moscow Times, Fox Business, Washington Times, the Jerusalem Post, Newsmax TV. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to Mr. Wood. It was basically like being immersed in current events. He knows what he's talking about. Unfortunately, we had a gigantic storm the night that we spoke, and the electricity got knocked out in Connecticut a few times, and hopefully it doesn't impact the conversation. I don't think it's going to. I'll probably hide that. I didn't need to mention it, but with no further ado, L.Todd Wood.
Good to be with you.
Oh, very good to be with you as well. So you varied special forces back and forth between the safe side of combat and the rough side. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, it's a little more complicated than that. I mean, a lot of it this was back in the early 90s after I had had a little bit of experience behind me in the Air Force. I went into special operations and actually flew different teams around for the first special operations wing down in Herbertville, Florida. And we would get a text and say, actually it was a beeper back then, be at the airport, bring your hot weather bag or cold weather bag, and we'd get on the airplane, and C5 usually, and the helicopters would be folded up and back, and the ground commander would be there. We didn't know where we're going sometimes when we're coming home, but and sometimes we stay away for months. But so it wasn't just in combat, but a lot of it was training and preparing for different missions. And but yes, I basically supported the Tier 1 counterterrorism teams for multiple years before I went out and got a real job on Wall Street.
That's interesting. Well, what'd you fly?
I flew MH-53J Pavlos. They're, if you remember back in the Iranian Desert One mission that was so destructive back in 1980 when they basically ran into another aircraft in the middle of the night in the desert. And,
that was Delta Force, right?
Yeah, and they all, lots of guys died, and they dragged them through the streets, and
that was their first mission too, wasn't it? I read.
It was, I don't know if it was their first one, but it was one of the early days in special ops. And basically, the Marine pilots that were flying those helicopters just didn't have the right equipment or training. Really wasn't their fault. They're good pilots, but they just didn't have what they needed to do that mission correctly. So after that, the Air Force took about the 45 or so, they were HH-53 Jolly Green Giants at the time, and put about $40 million a piece into them with navigation equipment, terrain following radar, satellite communications, GPS, weapons, electronic countermeasures. Basically, kind of made it a Battlestar Galactica to do that kind of mission. So that's what that aircraft was. It actually retired a few years ago, but
really?
You're getting old when they put the aircraft you flew in a museum. So
how does that feel to have like $45 million in your hands as you're flying in the dead of night with no lights? I always wondered when I was in the Army, you'd hear them like, the UH-60s flying overhead.
Right.
You had no clue where they were, but they were there. $45 million in between your legs, basically.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of pressure. I mean, but that's not really where the pressure comes from. The pressure really comes from the mission itself, getting these guys in there plus or minus 5 seconds where they want to be, turn the right way, at the right altitude, guns pointed the right direction. So it's very scripted how these
Hmm.
things go down, and if you screw something up, you can impact a lot of people around you. So that's where all the pressure really comes from.
So you work hand in hand with the teams a lot.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And the you mentioned the Army Task Force 160 out of Fort Bragg. We flew with them a lot as well.
What was it? SOAR? What was it? Air? I was at Fort
SOAR
Campbell.
160 is SOAR. Yeah, that's the group,
Yeah,
Special
that was.
Operations Aviation
We were
Group.
with them,
Yeah,
Fort Campbell too.
yeah,
Fifth group, I
yeah.
guess. I guess they're worth at Fort Bragg as well.
They're based out of Bragg. At least I think they're building them a whole new complex. I've been out of it a long time. I don't know where they are now, but
Okay,
we definitely
they're
worked with those guys a lot.
very secretive group. We drove fifth group out there a few times, dropped them off,
Hmm.
but we were not
Hmm.
allowed to hang out and look.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Do you miss it?
Well, it's a young man's game. I guess I should say I don't miss it. I'm glad I did it. I miss the camaraderie and the travel, but it was a lot of stress, so I don't miss that at all, to be honest.
But you write about it though. That's where your
I
fiction comes
do.
from.
It does come out in my novels, that's for sure, and that's what people love. I have a unique background because I was in the military. I did this, high speed stuff, and then I went to Wall Street, which is just a different kind of stress. So the combination of those two, I think, is unique, and I can see a lot of the financial and military issues pretty clearly that most people don't have that connection, or a lot of people don't anyway.
So I mean, in terms of the world theater, I mean, definitely
Hmm.
money, and then backing that up with combat arms. Can
Hmm.
you unbox that a little bit in terms of what we're looking at in fiction, the fiction that you're
Yeah,
writing?
what I try to do is, and I went to Wall Street in 1994 and left in 2012, I
Oh wow,
believe.
you got to see
So
a lot of stuff there too. Talk about
yeah,
combat.
so I saw the collapse of the internet bubble. I saw the Russian Asian collapse in 1998. I saw the bond market collapse in 94. I saw the real estate collapse in '08. So, I saw a lot. So all of that, what I try to do is write, uh, first of all, very thrilling, great reads that people can't put down. They got to be commercially fantastic. People just got to love the story, and I get that feedback, but I also try to include a lot of history and then tie it to current events as to what's going on now. So I don't think there's a lot of people out there that do that. Michener was kind of good at that. But I really want people to understand a lot. People tell me my first book, Currency, that they feel like they got a class in economics, finance it, but didn't really realize it. So that makes me happy. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do. But and
That's
make it
very
really
interesting.
commercial.
That's kind of like the dream of the writer to kind of hit those nails on the head. That's
Yeah,
the Dan Brown type of formula,
exactly,
sitting on the beach reading
exactly.
the book going, I can do this, and he punches it out in a weekend or
Hmm.
something. How'd you do it? How do you
Well, the
find the
first one,
zeitgeist? And
I was traveling all around the world, and I would see something, and I had always wanted to write. So I'd see like a scene, if I was in, Venezuela or something, I'd see something and take some pictures and write it down, just what I saw, and stick it on the computer. And, so after a decade, I had a lot of this stuff that I put in the books for scenes. So there's real world experience and descriptions of places that I really try to get accurate.
Mhm.
But I also really try to just tie that into the historical aspect of, why is this happening? Why is debt a bad thing? Why is what is interest rate risk? How can that impact us? And if you tell that in a story, and then people can understand the risk and really how Wall Street works, because I don't think 90% of the people in the country
No,
don't understand how it works.
yeah,
So
it's very
that was
interesting.
the goal of the books.
That's very interesting. So tell me about Currency then, your character, because character to me is the backbone of a good story.
Yeah,
You have a
well,
great plot, you have a great setting, but you need a character.
the character is a bond trader like I was. I mean, everybody puts a lot of themselves in the books, I'm sure,
Mhm.
and I would travel so much that I had, a lot of these scenes that I put in that, and I basically just started writing on the train going into Wall Street, an hour and a half each way from Connecticut, that I did for about 10 years. And so the character is a bond trader. I don't try to describe, Superman or anything. These are just ordinary guys that get thrown into certain situations that may have a military background or may have some knowledge that other people don't have. But I also try to make you're never going to guess how my stories play out. I hate predictability. So, and everybody, I try to make the endings just shockers, which I get that feedback also, which I think is important for a good story.
No, totally, right? I mean, you definitely don't want to, you want to keep them guessing. I mean,
Exactly.
you want your audience to think that the story is going to go a certain way and then twist it around on them at the last minute.
Exactly. And there's nothing worse for me to read a book and how it's going to end. I mean, to me, that's no fun at all.
To the T, right?
Yeah.
So the military plays a
Mm-hmm.
gigantic part in your writing,
Mm-hmm.
and it also plays a gigantic part in your journalism as well,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
Wall Street and money. But let's talk about current events a little bit in
Yeah.
terms of
Yeah.
Russia, because I think that definitely plays a lot in your
Oh,
thinking
for sure.
nowadays.
For sure.
So I'm really curious, especially with today. Today was
Mm-hmm.
gigantic with the
Mm-hmm.
leak, the 200 million uh, Republican, onslaught. What do you want to call it? The Republican National Convention,
Mm-hmm.
200 million registered voters just being flooded on the world market like that, and Syria and what's going on?
Well, people don't understand Russia. I spent a lot of time there, and I've really tried. I started studying the society when I was at the Air Force Academy, and so I had to study a strategic language, and it was either Russian, Arabic, or Mandarin or something. So I chose Russian, and then I traded a lot. And obviously, in the military, I learned a lot about their air forces and different things. So I was always fascinated with the society, and it's a really very unique society because they kind of split off from the West, 1,000 years ago, and went their own way, and then they were conquered by the Mongols, and so they have a really different view of life than us. I mean, um, they don't put as much, I guess, value on human life as the West at least says they do. So it's a different, they're really based on the state. If the Kremlin says you need to do something for the state, they will do it no matter what, even if they have to suffer. I mean, suffering's an art form over there.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
So
absolutely. If you've
it's
ever read any of the old literature, that's definitely something they've taken into a different type of
exactly. You're
mentality.
right. All the
But
old
haven't they always been kind of jealous of Western Europe and wanted to have been a part of the greater
true.
scheme of things?
And that's where a lot of the, I guess, I don't want to call it paranoia, but desire to be recognized and validated comes from. And so they've always come from that kind of deficit. But they're also just a fascinating people. They're so cultural, very much into education, the arts, theater, literature, but they're so damn corrupt at the same time.
So
It's
strong too, man.
yeah, it's
That's
just
the
a
thing that gets
fascinating
me.
culture. Yeah.
When I've met, I'm in New York, so I got the
Hmm.
Coney Island Russians coming into the city
Hmm.
all the time. I meet them. They're
Hmm.
just so intimidating. You just stick
True.
them in a bucket of ice and they will survive. It feels like if you fought one, they would just be dead and then still be putting up their fists to knock you out. They seem like an incredibly tough species of animal.
They are. That's a good way to put it. But they have a lot of problems too that they're probably going to have a hard time overcoming. I mean, they're dependent on hydrocarbons. They're not diversifying their economy, or they are very slowly. And there's so much corruption that no innovation can happen. So it's a real problem. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Maybe this leadership just has to die off, or I don't know, because the younger generation is much more open to having change. But in fact, you've seen a lot of the protests happening in Moscow and other cities recently, and it's mostly by the new generation who the Kremlin really can't control by social or by the state media. Because they're using social media,
Well,
so
Putin
it's
is kind of
fascinating.
part of that old animal, though, right? I mean, in terms
Yeah, he
of the
is.
old.
He is. And, he would make the argument that I've had to do what I had to do to get Russia basically on its feet again, which there's some truth to that too. So,
Which is surprising. Moscow's a beautiful city. I've seen
uh,
pictures of it recently, and surprisingly, it's not the place that I had in my imagination.
people don't understand. Well, Moscow is like an oasis in the middle of the, poor desert. I mean, because all the oligarchs are there, so all the money's there, so all the beautiful women come there trying to find their billionaire. So it's a playground. The city is just very well done. Lots of money flowing around. More billionaires there than anywhere else. So no, Moscow's fantastic if you get a chance to go there.
But we're dealing with a country where the young are diving in front of cars, killing themselves in the street. The
True.
suicide rate, mid-30s, people are drinking themselves to death. I mean,
True.
comparably, their quality of life is horrible if you like put
Yeah,
America,
if you go to Vladivostok or something like that, or somewhere out in the other cities, you're exactly correct. I mean, St. Petersburg and Moscow are again kind of islands, but the country has a lot of problems, and Putin is spending so much money on the military that it's pulling money out of the social services from hospitals, schools. A lot of the poor or the people who have cancer can't get cancer drugs, so they're committing suicide because there's so much regulation and restriction on the painkillers. So yeah, there's a lot of social problems they have to deal with.
The YouTube video that I watched today of yours was on October 7th last year. It's for my birthday, actually.
Oh, okay.
And you stated what was the question you asked? Why wouldn't Putin want to fight? Is that the question?
I don't remember that video, but I've done a bunch, but I'll trust you.
You mentioned how their military is just it really is staggering what they've done to kind of improve it. But then we've gone through that list of reasons why maybe their populace doesn't really care about winning a war. Their life kind of sucks. Why would the people of Russia say, okay, fine, I'll step in front of some bullets for you?
Because Putin is very good at making it not for him, but for the Russian state, the motherland, the Rodina. I mean, that is what he's just brilliant at. And so if you say that to a Russian, as I say, they will do anything. Although there is a festering underclass of social unrest that is there, but to this date, he's played a weak hand very well and has the Russian people really 100% by his side. Now, the one thing that will upset them is corruption, which they know is there, but when it's thrown in their faces, they get very angry. And that's the cause of a lot of these demonstrations that's been going on in Moscow and the other cities, because Navalny, who just announced he's going to run for president against Putin, did a video on the Prime Minister Medvedev and all his houses around the world and villas and wineries and all this stuff, and the people got very angry. It's had millions of views, and it's fascinating how social media really upset the apple cart there in Moscow.
That's very interesting. So running for president, does that actually mean you have a shot to do
No,
something?
no. But unless there are like a orange revolution, which is Putin's really scared of. So unless
What's
the people
an orange revolution?
well, like they had in Ukraine, like the Arab Spring, something like that.
Just an uprising of people who won't sit back down.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fascinating. So this is a really well described scene. Have any of your novels taken place in Russia? Obviously, you must have played some.
Well, a lot. Yeah, I wouldn't say all in Russia, but there's definitely a connection there and scenes there in all of them, and whether it be Ukraine or Russia or Moldova or any of those areas. I try to write what I know, and I know a lot about these areas, and most people don't. So I take people on trips. When they read a book of mine, they go around the world a few times and find places they never knew about, and try to put them right in there and let them experience it.
So when you graduated from the Air Force Academy, you got your, what did you get your undergrad in? Was it
Aeronautical
Russian?
engineering.
Oh, that's right. That's right. But you did work in Russian. That was your language.
Yes.
And then 1989 happened, the wall fell, and it looked like Russian was going to be one of those languages that you'd never use again.
Exactly.
But now Russia is turning out to be very important globally again.
It is, sure. And I actually started a website called Tsarism.com, which is, I've got reporters all over Eastern Europe and former Soviet territories, and posting stories daily about what's going on, just trying to educate people on what's happening. But yeah, you're right.
What is happening? They have Ukraine. They're fighting really, really hard politically, as well as it looks like now they've been on the ground. What's happening in Syria? What's happening in the Ukraine? What is happening in that area of the world?
Well, you got to think of Ukraine as kind of like Texas in the United States. I mean, that's how they see it. It was part of their country at one point. It was on its own republic, 30 years ago after the fall of the Soviet Union, but they never really saw it as a real country. And so they took Crimea, or Krim as the Russians call it. That was part of Russia also, and they've basically kept the government in Kiev off kilter by keeping this war smoldering in the east so that they don't move too far to the EU. Whether that'll work or not for them, I don't know. And the other thing is Putin needs an enemy, so to keep the public's mind off their own internal problems. So that's where Syria comes in. Basically, that's been a long-term Soviet-Russian ally, and they're not going to let it go for anything. So
See,
that's what's behind this.
I thought Moscow always had Chechnya though.
Chechnya is, yeah, that was part of all of this goes back to the Russian Empire. I mean, the Soviet Union was just a blip on the radar screen, but the Imperial Russia has owned all these areas for centuries. And
No,
that's
in
where
terms of like the Muslim or the Islamic, the oh man, I don't know how to describe, but they had the enemies there. The opera house hostage taking.
Oh yeah, the 30% of Russia is Muslim. So yeah, they had a lot of problems down in Chechnya and Dagestan and all in there, and they basically just destroyed any opposition in the two Chechen wars, and they installed a dictator that they allow to do what he wants down there.
But that wasn't enough of an enemy force for him to develop.
Oh, I see what you pointed. No, that's internal. He needs somebody external. I mean, it's part of Russia, so he needs somebody. And the Americans fit that bill perfectly. So,
is this a war? I mean, is this a war that potentially he really wants to fight, and is this a war that he could potentially win?
Hold on one sec.
Sure.
Yeah, just doing a broadcast here. Thanks. In Syria,
yes.
Yeah, he does want to win that, or at least he wants to look like he's winning it. Everything with him is perception and how things look to people and the world, and making people scared of Russia. I mean, that's what he's doing. But he wants really to keep Syria or the Assad regime in power, because they let Russia use all those bases there at Tartus on the sea for the access to the Mediterranean, and also some of the other Latakia, which is an air base there now. So it's important to them. But what they're doing is trying to keep the regime in power. They're not really fighting terrorism. They're just trying to keep Assad in power and fighting the opposition.
So they learned their lesson in Afghanistan. They're not necessarily trying to rule a country in that region. They're just trying to keep somebody in power.
Yeah, that's basically it. Sure.
So how's your publication doing?
Zarim is doing really well. The website is exploding. I mean, we're getting going on Google News soon, and we're hiring reporters every day. And so, yeah, that's done really well. I'm also writing for the Washington Times, as you know, and others. Mm-hmm. So, it's a lot of work. That's why we had to delay the thing today.
Has your fiction taken a backseat to your journalism career?
No, it's kind of gone hand in hand. I mean, one has led to the other. So that's really, I started writing, which led to the journalism, which leads to more writing. I just did a nonfiction book on the Korean War, and that worked out really well. So it's just, where it ends up, I don't know, but things keep coming my way. We're making a movie now in LA on the last book on the Korean War. That's moving forward. Big news to come on that soon. Just been very, very busy.
That's what I noticed about you. Looking at your website, your Twitter, you seem to be very, very motivated. You're producing a lot of content.
Yes.
What time do you wake up in the morning, and what time do you go to sleep at night? How are you putting all this stuff out there?
I don't get a lot of sleep, to be honest. It's not good, and I've started to delegate a lot of stuff. Especially like with the website. Bringing in people who can help with the marketing, who can help with the editing, who can help with the actual writing. We brought on an investigative journalist. Just building out that infrastructure to help with everything, because it all feeds into each other. And, again, I don't know where this is going, but it's moving. And what I really want to do is just, make a difference in the areas that I'm interested in, and try to add some value to people, especially on the news, because I think there's a big opportunity in the news right now, because so many people have lost a lot of credibility. I mean, so many news organizations that there's huge opportunity to step in and take some real estate on that.
A lot of people do not trust what's being reported anymore, and you can step in there and gather that trust up.
Exactly.
It's very apt point. Let me ask you, can you pinpoint where it started for you, where you developed, where the ball started rolling?
On the journalism stuff?
Or has it always been like, yeah, exactly. I mean, you got off Wall Street in 2012, you said. Had you already known that you were going going in this direction, or has this been something that's kind of developed over?
No, it developed because I started writing. I published my first book, and then I was in Moscow and I started writing for the Moscow Times a good bit. And then I got a call or an email one night from the Washington Times saying, we want to fly you to Korea. Will you go to a conference there? And I said, sure, this is a fake email from Nigeria, right? And then I looked into it and they said, no, this is real. We saw some of the stuff you wrote for the Moscow Times. We want you to come to Korea. And so I did that for a conference for a week on national security. And then I started writing for them. It developed into a daily column, and it's just blossomed. So now I'm in print once a week at the paper, and that has led to other things. That provides a lot of credibility for me for other areas. So yeah, I mean, I'm actually more selective now on what I do. I wrote a lot in the past just because I needed to get my name out there, but now I'm much more selective on actually what I write about or who I write for. Yeah, yeah.
So Los Angeles, you're producing a movie, you're actually optioned. What is actually happening in LA?
I tend to do things myself. You know, I started my own. Well, sure. I started my own publishing company for my books to get better distribution, and that's grown. And I just hired a CEO to run that.
Oh, cool.
But so we started a movie production company too. I don't know. We may bring in a big studio to do this. We may not. But there's definitely, we've met with some, you know, A-list people out there, and there's big interest in the story. And so the movie's going to get made. How it gets done, I don't know, but it's going to be released in summer of 2019, so 2 years from now.
So you're a hard charger then. When you do something, you do it all the way. You said you started your own publication company to publish your books.
Yes.
So you started that process as an indie publisher.
I did, because I wasn't getting the right feedback I wanted on my first novel. It was very timely. I knew it had to get out, and agents were saying, well, it might be a year, I don't know. And I said, no, that's not going to work. So I just started my own company, and I brought in a bunch of other authors over time, and it's a real boutique imprint now. And we've just reformed the company out in California, and it's going to be growing. I'm not going to be in the day-to-day operation anymore. Again, I've delegated it to another guy who knows how to run that business. And so we're going to grow that, and I'll add my name to it and run my books through it still to help them get notoriety. But yeah, with today's technology, you don't need, I mean, really what you need is hard work and distribution and smarts on how to get your stuff out there. If you got that, you don't need.
Smarts is interesting. The smarts is interesting because not everybody actually has the business acumen to make that happen. Because it's marketing, right?
Yeah.
How to spin that sales.
True. And that's what we're going to try to do, is kind of fill that niche of, you know, we're not going to go find Dan Brown's, but we're going to find that next up and coming guy who needs some help on how to get his book published, how to get it out there, and you know, and kind of walk them through the process. So that's going to be our model.
Do you find them, or do they find you?
Works both ways. Mostly they come to us. They come to me normally, and I'm starting to refer them to the CEO of the company and let him make the call, and you know, we'll talk about it and whether we want to run with it or not.
What kind of stuff do you think what kind of stuff do you think fits best with your business model?
We're really not limiting to anything. You know, we've had science fiction, we've had thrillers, we've had historical novels, we've had autobiographies. You know, I did the autobiography of wrote the memoirs, or published the memoirs of the biggest coin counterfeiter ever for the casinos in Connecticut and the whole Northeast. Is a mobster named Louis the Coin. We published his memoirs. You know, fascinating, riding through Italy in a Ferrari with 3 girls in the car. You know, just great stories. And so we did that. We're looking at doing a cookbook. I mean, so we're going to have areas in all different areas. We're just looking for good product that we can get it out there.
2012, you were at the head of the line in terms of kind of the digital publishing era, would you say?
I don't know if I was at the head, but I definitely had a steep learning curve, and a lot has changed since then, and it's much easier now. There's a lot more. There's more platforms out there. Publishing is not hard. It's just the push of a button. I mean, the hard part is the marketing.
Yeah,
right?
Simple, right?
Yeah.
And my thing is, it just seems like everybody's doing it.
True.
Which makes the companies a little bit more important because they seem to be pulling, I don't know, this once that the publishing companies are kind of winning because they're able to pull specific writers out of the slush pile now, and they're deemed
That is true.
the better ones. You know what I mean? But there's just millions of people down in the bottom.
So
It's
the
hard to
trick is to how
pull.
to get you've got to develop
The trick is
your own audience. You've got to develop your own audience and your own
Yes.
demand for your books. Once you have that, somebody will look at you. For instance, I just sold off my first book to a very large publisher in New York. So that's going to be in stores. Currency is going to be re-released. It's not in print right now, but it's going to be re-released in March of this year. Actually, earlier than that, but in stores on March 6th across the country.
That's fantastic.
So,
congratulations.
thank you. So you're right. You have to build your own demand in your own market, in your own audience. And I would tell people, find value, something that you can really add value to somebody's life. You know, like me, it's with news. So I started a news feed, and I constantly pump out news that I think is interesting. And then we advertise books, you know, every 10th or 11th post. So that for me has been fantastic.
Exactly. Building an audience based on something that you can give them for free,
Right.
because they
Exactly.
want free. They don't want to give anybody any money.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because
No,
nobody has any.
you have to find a way to add value to your audience. Once you do that, they will let you do what you need to do advertising wise, but you have to build up some credibility there first.
So it's advertising. That's where the dollars are.
Well, I mean, you know, like I said, I talk about my books. They will let you talk about your product if you're adding value, right?
The question though is, are they going to buy the book, or are they buying something else? Because there's a guy, his name is John Scalzi. I was just, surfing Twitter the other day, got one of his tweets, and he says he's giving his books away for free. And the question was why, and he says, just, I'm trying to gain readership. What else is he trying to do? He's an author. He's a science fiction author. What else does he have? You know what I mean? It's not like he's sewing shirts on the side trying to sell t-shirts or something. What else is he trying to sell? What else is there? If he's giving his books away for free, how is he trying to pay his mortgage?
Well, see, I'm not a big believer in that. And a lot of people have used that. I've given away a lot of books. If people, you know, email me and say, look, I'm out of work, I'd love to read your book, but I can't afford it, then I'll send them a free download. You know, but I've given away a lot of books, but you know, coming from Wall Street, if you give something away, people look at it as less value.
No, I've heard that too.
I mean, I think I'm the opposite. You know, I know my books are really good. The feedback's there, the reviews are there, so I'm going to charge for them. And again, what I do give away is my hard time and effort and the people I've hired on the business side and news side in providing this news flow for free. But in return, you're going to let me advertise my books. So, you know, we've got several 100,000 people now that follow us, and we're looking at building an app to basically mimic that Twitter feed and Facebook news feed that people can download for free, but there'll be advertising on there. You know, it's just like a TV station. You know, you just have to find where you can add value. Maybe you're a great cook. Maybe you're a great, you know, photographer. I don't know, but something that you can give to people where they see that they will let you advertise.
It's that word. It's advertising. It's being sneaky with it, trying to slip in that Tide commercial where the reader or the viewer doesn't get, oh, you're trying to sell me.
Right. Right. Well, it's capitalism, right? I mean, and I get, you know,
it's trying to do it sneaky because nobody wants to sit there for 30 seconds and being, you know, inundated by a Tide commercial and their time being swallowed up, because we know that's finite. And we don't want that 30 seconds wasted with that Tide commercial anymore. But we're okay with the, you know, you tricked me. Haha, I saw the Tide commercial, kinda.
Well, I get people coming to me and say, I don't even watch TV anymore. I don't listen to the news anywhere, but the only thing I do is read your Twitter feed. So that has been really successful for us. But yes, and again, I'm very upfront with people. I say, if you follow this feed, you're going to get advertising. That's the trade-off. And so people are like, okay, that's cool with me. So I'm just upfront with them. If they don't want to follow me, they don't have to. You know, but I know what I'm providing is good. It's a good value. The books are fantastic. So I will add value to their life, but they're going to have to let me talk about my books. That's the deal.
The interesting thing about that model is that you never know what you're going to get. It's kind of like the grab bag of news. Am I going to get your tweet,
or am I going to get, you know, the other guy's tweet? What kind of news am I going to get
Well,
in any
see,
given minute?
my feed is very specific. If you like what I had to say, you're going to listen to me because it's very, it has a viewpoint of the world that I put out, and there's an audience for that. Some people won't listen to it. So, you know, I know who my audience is, and I've worked on that to try to find out who they are and really give them what they're looking for, which is, I don't post any fake news. If I know it's, you know, I do a lot of work. I make sure that what we put out is true. It may have a viewpoint on it. What's that?
How do you verify? Like, I mean, just in general,
well, I know good
the fake
sources.
news
You
thing
know,
is a huge issue right now.
if there's something that's put out that has some doubt to it, I'll say, you know, I don't know if this is verified, or I'll say developing, or I'll say, but I know my sources, and I know, and a lot of the stuff I do myself through my website, Zarism. So yeah, I know that is, you know, strong, and I'm adding news that nobody will see anywhere else. So that's been really good for us.
So the 200 million names that got leaked through the Republican, you know, I don't even know what it's called at this point. The marketing company, this, that, whatever it is.
Yeah, I saw that today. Yeah.
You know, I've heard names like Steve Bannon. I've heard Russia attached to it. I've heard Breitbart, and I've heard so many things attached to that leak in just a small sliver of time. Nothing verified, and I know nothing concrete. And I know the whole story, you know, in terms of like fake this, that, and I know nothing.
I don't know a lot about that story. I haven't put anything out because I've been so dang busy all day. I haven't had a chance to look at it, but
well, it's just interesting in terms of the news. That's gigantic, and it's already been besmirched in terms of reality versus fantasy for me.
Sure.
I don't know what's real. It's like a huge conspiracy. 61% of the voting population's names and numbers and addresses and how they'll, you know, what they eat for breakfast is out there in the world. I don't know what's real and what's fake.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know anything about that story, but I do know that, you know, this Russian or Syrian aircraft shot down. You know, today we put out a story from a guy who's was in the Israeli army, another Israeli Air Force pilot who was an U.S. Air Force pilot as well, and we put out some good analysis on what Russia's options are in the region. So, you know, I know that's a good story. I know the sources are good, and so we put out a lot of that stuff. Opinion. If it's opinion, we'll say opinion, but if it's analysis, you know, we'll put it out as what we think.
So who do we trust that Russia is going to shoot down U.S. aircraft? Is that opinion or is that actual?
Well, that's what they said. I mean, you can take that off their state website. Whether or not
they actually put it on their official.
Yeah, whether or not that's they will actually do that, I have my doubts. But that's.
Bro, I hope they don't. Right? I mean, how many planes do we have actually flying in Syrian airspace at this point?
I have no idea, but it's not a small number. And
we're actually running bombing missions into Syria?
Well, I don't know where the U.S. forces are attacking primarily. They're actually going after the Islamic State. So, you know, ISIS means in Syria and in Iraq, and so it's all over that area. So I'm sure they've gone into Syria as well as in northern Iraq.
What's going to happen, do you think? If you could predict the future, which obviously, you know, that's your job, what do you think is going to happen in Syria and Iraq, the whole area?
I think the Assad regime will stay. I think, you know, at some point, once what we're going through right now is a reset, right? Obama had one view of the world and acted a certain way, and Trump is completely different. So you're having a reset in that region, and there's resets of expectations, and you know, Obama would have never shot down that Syrian plane. So that's the other side of that shot is having to recalculate their whole worldview in that area right now. So what's going to happen? I think eventually that we'll come to some type of deal with the Russians that protects our interest as well as theirs, and can go after the Islamic State, because that's the joint threat that we both face in a big way.
Do you think that the Russians had anything to do with hacking into our election?
Well, what I say to people is, yes, I think know, I don't think they actually changed the direction of the vote, but I do believe they tried to find ways to possibly do that in the future, or to, change the narrative that was happening in the election. But the
They
thing
did
that
that. Just
the thing
having
that I tell people is that we do the same thing, and they've been doing that for,
decades.
we have done the same thing in Israel. We did it in Russia. I think a lot of this was Putin getting back at Hillary Clinton for what she tried to do to him. So my concern really is not so much that they changed votes, but that they are not able to. I mean, they're going to continue to do this. This is going to stop, no matter who's in the presidency. So they want to delegitimize our elections, and they want to, cause havoc and make democracy look not great to their people. Because Putin is always saying, look at what's going on. Do you really want democracy, or do you want a strong leader who can basically fix things? So that's what they're trying to do in all of this. And my thoughts are they should not be able to interfere with our elections. I mean, if we can't secure our computer systems and really protect against cyber threats, and we're in a lot of trouble, because it's not just the Russians, it's the North Koreans, Chinese, Iranians. They're all doing this. Our power grid is very vulnerable. It's not just elections. It's much more serious things. If that's, things that could impact us much more quickly and devastate. If they can shut down our power grid, even for a short period of time, and that's no food, it's no water, it's no medicine, it's no travel, it's everything just stops, and people will die. So cyber is a huge issue that has to be addressed, and with our tech giants, we should be able to protect our systems. And that's my thoughts on that.
No, totally, I agree. There was a fantastic thriller written a few years ago about an EMP attack that knocked out the power grid, and it was scary. It was horrible. I mean, just the implications of, running out of pharmaceuticals for a few weeks, and the deaths that would entail. I mean, me and my wife read it. It was just a nightmare.
Sure. Well, that's why North Korea is so dangerous, because they really want to do that to us. I mean, it's a regime that would beat up a college kid just because he supposedly took a poster and kill him has got serious problems, and they don't give a crap about us or anything. So that's a real issue.
Is that how he died? He got beat?
I don't know whether it was beaten or some kind of psychedelic drugs trying to make him talk. Who knows? It was torture, so they killed him, and how Trump responds to be seen.
Seems like he wants to institute a travel ban.
I don't know. Well, I haven't seen that. I've been off news all day today, so I got to get plugged in again.
I think it's interesting, because if you read, going back to the elections, the issues anyway, it has kind of delegitimized our election.
It has.
We seem to be split. It has worked. We're split down the middle. I don't know if you're familiar with it, Reddit. Seems like everybody's against Trump or against Hillary, or, I mean, not my president, or, beating each other with bricks on the street. I mean,
it's bad.
It's horrible.
I agree completely.
I don't know where tomorrow is going to land for us. It's a scary place for my children.
I think we're at the bottom, and the pendulum will swing the other way. And for my children, I hope so. So, that's my take on it.
I mean, what's the other way, and how do we get there? What's the swing like? I mean, swings are tending.
Well, I think that
as an engineer, the fulcrum swings violently. I mean, there's going to be a lot of momentum there, and where does it end up?
Well, we may have some kind of, on Wall Street they call it, a crescendo of selling, or an apocalyptic moment kind of thing, and that will turn it. Maybe that was the shooting recently. I don't know, but there is an underclass. No, the one in Washington when they shot Scalise.
Oh, the senator.
I don't know what's going to change it, but we blame Russia for killing journalists and killing the political opposition, where we just had a very high-ranking government official attempted assassination.
Mr. Wood, thank you so much for talking with me. This was such a fascinating conversation.
Great, man. I enjoyed it.
We should have mentioned that we didn't.
Well, if people want good thrillers, go to my website, L.toddwood.com, and we'll sign them and get them out to you.
There you go. I did see that you do sign them. That's fantastic. $19.99. And I'll definitely include as much information as I can in the show notes.
Great, cool.
Again, man,
Yeah,
really,
just put the
really enjoyed
website
the
up there, and I
conversation.
appreciate it.
No problem at all. And I appreciate you hanging out with me for the last hour. Thank you very much, and good luck with everything that you're attempting to do.
You bet. Anytime, man. Have a good night.
Great.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.
And that was Mr. Wood. As I stated, his contact information will be in the show notes. Next up, episode number 23 on Origin. I got to speak with a professor of mine from the University of South Florida, John Henry Fleming. Fantastic author, PhD, New York writer, down in Florida, Tampa. Again, great conversationalist. You can follow me, Brian Yellow, on Twitter. Check out the website, brianyellow.com. Tons of fiction on there, trying to upload as much as I can. That's going to be it for me today. Talk to you soon. Have a great week. Bye-bye.